What if your soul had been waiting decades for a specific moment, a moment not of physical triumph, but of quiet awakening? That moment, for many, comes around the age of 65, an age often framed by society as a time of slowing down, of retirement. But what if Jung would have argued the opposite? That this is when life truly begins, not externally, but internally. At 65, something stirs in the unconscious. A portal opens, not to a new career, but to a new perception of self. Carl Jung believed that human life is not a straight line, but a spiral, and every turning point is a return, a confrontation with what was left behind. At 65, the psyche confronts the great existential shift. Who am I now without the roles that once defined me? No longer a worker, a provider, a planner for the future, you are left with the raw material of your soul. And it is there in that quiet space that the psyche starts whispering its oldest questions. What have I truly lived for? What parts of myself did I silence to survive? These questions do not come as enemies, but as guides sent by the unconscious, urging you to look not forward, but inward. Because according to Jung, the final chapters of life are not for expansion of the outer world, but the deepening of the inner one. In Jungian thought, every stage of life is marked by an archetype, a pattern of psychological truth. Childhood bears the innocent, youth carries the hero, and maturity introduces the ruler or caregiver. But at the threshold of late life, a new, mysterious figure emerges, the elder. Not simply an old person, but a soul illuminated by insight, by reflection, by surrender. At 65, the elder archetype knocks on the door. It doesn't ask what you have achieved. It asks what you have integrated, what wounds you have turned into wisdom. The elder is not concerned with prestige, but with purpose. And Jung would insist, if you ignore this call, if you cling to youth's roles, you risk stagnation. But if you listen, something sacred begins. This archetype comes with questions. What legacy are you leaving behind? Not in titles or possessions, but in essence. What knowledge do you hold that no one else can offer? The elder is a custodian of the collective unconscious. Their personal story becomes a myth others can follow. And perhaps the most haunting question the elder archetype poses is this: are you ready to pass the torch, not because you are finished, but because you finally see the whole path? There is no true transformation without death, not physical death, but a symbolic one. Jung was clear, every major phase of life requires letting go of something precious, something once vital. At 65, it may be your identity as a doer, a maker, a contributor to society. This is painful, it feels like loss, but it's also liberation. Symbolic death clears the ground for something else to rise. Depth, reflection, integration. It's not about becoming less, it's about becoming whole. Yet the ego resists. It wants relevance, action, applause. It fears fading into invisibility. But Jung argued that to truly evolve, the ego must die to its illusions, especially the illusion of control. This is the stage where your persona, the mask you wore for decades, begins to crack. And through that crack, light enters. That light is yourself. Not the social self, but the true self, who waited patiently for you to slow down enough to hear it. But to meet the self, something else in you must end. And that's not a tragedy, that's alchemy. Throughout his work, Jung described the self as the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. Most people, he believed, spend the first half of life building a solid ego, but the second half, that's when the ego must step aside to let the self emerge. At 65, this return becomes urgent. You are no longer building, you are uncovering. The self is not a new identity. It's the integration of all identities you've ever worn. It is the reconciliation between who you thought you should be and who you always were. This journey inward often begins with restlessness, an undefined yearning, a sense that something is missing even when everything appears complete. Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole, and the self, like a long-lost twin, waits at the center of that spiral, not to judge you, but to welcome you home. You don't find the self in achievement. You find it in silence, in dreams, in the symbols that rise from the depths when the noise of ambition finally fades. And when you do, you don't just meet who you are, you meet what you were always meant to be. At 65, time no longer feels like a river rushing forward. It feels like a still lake, reflecting back every moment you thought you had left behind. Jung taught that the unconscious never forgets. It merely waits. And at the threshold of old age, the waiting ends. Suddenly, memories you buried resurface. Not just triumphs, but regrets, missed chances, unresolved pains. Why? Because the unconscious understands something the ego often denies, that to complete the journey of life you must reclaim every piece of yourself, even the broken ones. At this age, time itself becomes an ally of the soul, forcing reflection. The past is no longer something to escape or improve upon. It becomes sacred ground. Each memory asks you, have you made peace with me? And Jung would insist, peace with. The past is not forgetting, it is integrating. It's carrying all your former selves within you, not as shame but as wisdom. If you listen closely, you'll hear the invitation whispered through these reflections. Forgive, accept, embrace. Because only those who make peace with their pasts can walk freely into the mystery of their future. There's a part of yourself you hoped would stay hidden forever. The flaws, the rage, the fears you buried deep beneath the persona you carefully built. Jung, he called this hidden side the shadow. And he warned, what you do not bring into consciousness will come back as fate. At 65, the shadow doesn't just knock, it barges in. Retirement, loss of social roles, even the proximity of death strips away the distractions that once kept the shadow at bay. Suddenly, the unresolved anger, the guilt, the betrayals, they demand attention. But this confrontation isn't punishment. It's a call to wholeness. The shadow is not evil, it is life unlived. It is potential, creativity, depth. Jung believed that integrating the shadow was essential for true individuation, for becoming your full self. Facing your shadow at this stage is terrifying, but it's also freeing, because every ghost you embrace transforms into an ally. Every fear you name loses its power, and in doing so you reclaim parts of your soul you didn't even know you had lost. One of the most common fears after 60 is that it's too late. Too late to change, to grow, to become. But Jung offered a radical perspective. Individuation, the process of becoming truly yourself, doesn't just happen in youth. In fact, it is often only after the distractions of youth fade that true individuation can begin. Life before 60, Jung argued, is often about adaptation, to family, to society, to career. But past that point, adaptation gives way to authenticity. Now the task is no longer to fit in, it is to break free. At 65, the soul's whisper grows into a roar. Be who you are, not who you were told to be. It's not too late, it's precisely the right time, because now you have perspective, experience, and the courage born of survival. Individuation at this stage is not about grand gestures, it's about quiet transformations, speaking your truth, honoring your needs, following your curiosity. It's not the beginning of decline, it's the beginning of liberation. You spent decades chasing success, titles, wealth, recognition, and perhaps you achieved much of what you aimed for. Yet, now, a strange emptiness creeps in. Success feels hollow. Goals that once ignited passion now seem meaningless. Jung foresaw this existential void. He wrote that after achieving the goals of the first half of life, a person must find new meaning, or risk falling into despair. External victories can no longer substitute for internal fulfillment. At 65, the question shifts from "what have I achieved" to "what have I become?" Success is no longer measured in awards, but in authenticity, in depth, in the courage to explore the inner worlds left neglected during the race of ambition. This emptiness is not failure. It is the space where something deeper can finally grow. Jung would argue that it is only when success loses its luster that the soul can finally ask, "What was I really searching for all along?" And if you dare to listen, you might find that the real treasure wasn't the conquest, but the self you buried along the way, waiting patiently to be found. At night, when the world quiets, something ancient stirs. You dream. But these are not the dreams of ambition or anxiety. They are visions, symbolic messages whispered from the depths of the unconscious. Carl Jung believed that dreams later in life carry a special significance. They are not about survival, but about meaning. At 65, the ego's grip loosens, allowing the unconscious to speak more clearly. The images are vivid, mysterious, sometimes unsettling. A child lost in the forest, an old house falling apart, a river that leads nowhere. Each one a metaphor, not for the world outside, but for the soul within. Jung taught that dreams are the royal road to the self, and in old age, they become even more urgent. They ask, what is unfinished? What is calling to be born, even now? These dreams are not random. They are blueprints, guides, maps to your new mission. Not a mission of the body, but of the spirit. Listening to your dreams is not a poetic exercise. It is a necessity, because within them lie the seeds of your final and perhaps most meaningful transformation. You've lived a life filled with relationships, partners, children, colleagues, friends, and yet, around 65, many feel an aching loneliness that no dinner party or phone call can seem to cure. This is not ordinary loneliness. Jung would call it archetypal, a loneliness rooted in the very structure of the soul's journey. In youth, loneliness is a lack of company. In later life, it's a confrontation with existential truth that no one else can walk your inner path. At this stage, the psyche begins to pull inward. You are called to reconcile with yourself, and that often means stepping away from the noise of others. But here lies the paradox. This loneliness is not your enemy. Jung would say it is a sacred space, a psychological womb where something new can be born. Only in solitude can you hear the deeper voice, the voice of the self. So, if you feel alone, do not run from it. Enter it. Sit with it. It is not a void, but a vessel, and it may be the only place where the truth about who you really are is waiting. As the tide of life recedes, it leaves behind the debris of memory, sharp, beautiful, and often painful. At 65, memories do not just visit, they flood. Moments you thought you'd forgotten return in vivid color. A word you shouldn't have said, a hand you should have held, a dream you abandoned. Jung taught that the unconscious does not discard experiences. It stores them, waiting for the right time to reveal their meaning. That time, he believed, is often later in life, when you have the perspective to see not just what happened, but why it mattered. Regret is not a weakness. It is a guide, a mirror reflecting the soul's deepest longings. But the danger lies in getting stuck, looping the same sorrow without transformation. Jung would say, don't resist the regret. Dialogue with it. Ask what it wants you to see, to forgive, to change. Healing the past is not erasing it. It's weaving it into the fabric of your story, not as shame, but as sacred thread. And only then can you face the future with clarity and peace. Pain changes you, that much is certain. But how it changes you, that is the choice. Jung saw suffering not as a punishment, but as a process, a sacred initiation. At 65, suffering may come in many forms: physical decline, loss of loved ones, the creeping fear of insignificance. But Jung would ask, what is this pain trying to reveal? He wrote that neurosis, the psychic illness of the soul, is often the result of avoiding legitimate suffering. When you numb it, deny it, run from it, it grows stronger. But when you face it with openness, it transforms. Suffering strips away illusions. It clarifies what truly matters. It brings depth, humility, compassion. It opens the door to empathy, not just for others, but for the broken parts of yourself. And in that openness, wisdom is born. So when suffering visits, don't silence it. Ask it what it wants you to see. Let it teach you. Because, as Jung believed, the wound is where the light enters, and the most painful parts of your journey may hold the keys to your most profound awakening. At a certain point, the material world begins to dim, not because it loses its beauty, but because something even more compelling starts to call. At 65, many feel this shift. The soul begins to long for transcendence. Not religion in the traditional sense, but a personal, living spirituality. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not?" Jung saw the spiritual instinct as a natural part of the psyche, not a belief system, but a function. He believed that aging awakens this function with force. Why? Because when the ego no longer finds satisfaction in status, wealth, or roles, it starts to seek connection to something beyond itself. This is not escapism, it's expansion, a need to connect to the mystery that has always pulsed beneath the surface. At 65, you are invited to ask, what is the meaning of all this? What endures beyond the body, beyond the name? Dreams may take on cosmic tones. Synchronicities multiply. The veil between the inner and outer world grows thin. Jung would say, follow that thread. Because in this final phase of life, the greatest adventure may not be what you do, but what you discover within the invisible. What will remain of you when you are gone? Not the house, the bank account, or the titles. Those will fade. But Jung would argue that your true legacy lies in symbols, in the archetypal energy you leave behind, the transformation you embodied, the truth you lived. At 65, the idea of legacy shifts. It's no longer about what you built, but about what you became. Did you live your truth? Did you heal generational wounds? Did you dare to be whole in a fragmented world? Jung believed that the soul's evolution leaves an imprint on the collective unconscious, a kind of psychic DNA passed on not through blood, but through myth. If you faced your shadow, others may find the courage to face theirs. If you embraced yourself, you help pave the way for others to do the same. This symbolic legacy is invisible but powerful. It's the energy you infused into your family, your community, your art, your presence. It's the story people tell when they say there was something about them, something real. So ask yourself, what story do I want to leave behind? Not in words, but in essence. And now, we arrive at the threshold no one can escape. Death. For most, it is a terrifying unknown. But Jung viewed death not as a defeat, but as the final transformation. Not the end of life, but the end of illusion. To Jung, death was a return, not to nothingness, but to the self in its purest form. He believed the psyche prepared for death just as the body prepared for sleep, through dreams, through symbolic acts, through letting go. The fear comes from the ego, which cannot imagine existing outside of time, but the self, it already knows. At 65 and beyond, you are called to make peace with the inevitable, not through denial, but through integration. You look death in the eye and ask not, why must I go? But what am I taking with me? The love, the wisdom, the essence. Jung would remind you, death is not darkness, it is a door. And perhaps your entire life was preparing you for this. The moment when the soul takes its final step, not toward an ending, but toward completion. So as you stand before the great unknown, do not tremble. Bow, breathe, and walk through with the knowledge that you are finally, fully whole. And now, as we draw this profound journey to a close, I want to invite you to pause with me for just a moment. Take a breath, a deep, conscious breath. Feel the life moving through you, the quiet pulse of existence that you did not create and yet sustain within you. All along this path, from the early echoes of Carl Jung's wisdom about the human soul to the quiet revelations of the later years of life, we have seen that life is not merely a sequence of events. It is a deep, mysterious, sacred unfolding, an invitation to deeper and deeper layers of truth. At 65 and beyond, life offers not merely an ending, but a beginning of a different kind. It asks us to shift from doing to being, from conquering to contemplating, from acquiring to surrendering. It is a passage not into irrelevance, but into revelation. It is here, in these quieter, slower days, that many finally hear the whisper that had been there all along, masked by the noise of ambition and the clamor of youth. That whisper calls you home, not to a place, but to yourself, to the truth of who you are, and if you are willing to hear it, to the one who crafted you with love beyond understanding. You see, this life, with all its beauty and heartbreak, its striving and surrendering, is not an accident. It is a story written by hands greater than ours, a story where every joy and every wound has meaning, where every step, even those that seemed lost or broken, were leading somewhere, leading to this very moment, right here, right now. Carl Jung, though deeply rooted in psychology, glimpsed this great mystery. His writings are filled with the sense that the human soul is not isolated, but profoundly connected to something transcendent, something eternal. He spoke of the self, that great, hidden totality of who we are, as being, in essence, a spark of the divine. And perhaps, if we listen closely enough, we will recognize that the divine has not remained distant. It has come near. It has entered into our human story, stepped into our reality, not as an abstract force, but as a person, clothed in humility and love. There is a truth so beautiful, so vast, that it humbles every human heart that truly encounters it. And it is this: you are loved, not because you earned it, not because you achieved perfection, but because you were made to be loved, crafted intentionally, known intimately, pursued relentlessly by the Creator himself. And the depth of that love was revealed in the most extraordinary way, through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Some of you watching may have heard this before, perhaps so often that it has faded into background noise. Others may be hearing it anew, as if the words carried a new weight. Either way, know this: the love we speak of is not small, it is not transactional, it is not conditional upon your success or failure. It is a love so vast that it moved heaven itself, as it is written in the ancient Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Pause on that for a moment. Let it sink deeper than the mind. Let it touch your heart. God loved the world, loved you, enough to give everything, to bridge the infinite gap between human frailty and divine perfection. Not with judgment, but with grace. Not with condemnation, but with a hand reaching out in mercy. And today, wherever you are in your journey, whether standing at the dawn of your elder years, whether grappling with regrets or basking in peace, the invitation remains open. Jesus Christ stands as the ultimate expression of that love, not merely a historical figure or a moral teacher, but the living Savior, the one who offers not just words of hope, but the very life of God poured into your spirit. If you sense that stirring in your heart, that quiet knowing that you were made for something more, that you are deeply seen and deeply loved, know that it is not coincidence. It is the gentle voice of the shepherd calling his sheep home. And responding to that call does not require perfection. It does not demand that you have all the answers. It simply asks for an open heart, a heart willing to say, yes, I need you, I trust you, be the Lord and Savior of my life. Some of you may be wondering, am I too late? And the answer is a resounding no. You are not too late. If you are breathing, if your heart still beats, then the door of grace remains wide open. No matter your past, no matter your doubts, no matter your brokenness, you are welcome. The cross of Christ is wide enough and strong enough to carry every burden, every wound, every sin. Imagine a love so profound that it not only forgives you, but transforms you. That takes your fractured pieces and makes of them a new creation. That is the promise held out in Jesus. Not religion as burden, but relationship as life. Not duty, but delight. Not fear, but freedom. And so, as we conclude this journey today, I want to invite you to respond, not just intellectually, but with your heart. If you have never opened your life to Jesus Christ, or if you once did and drifted away, know that He is closer than you realize. You can turn to Him right now, in the quiet of your own spirit. No ritual, no performance. Just a simple, sincere prayer, something like, Jesus, I believe you are who you say you are. I believe you died for me and rose again. I ask you to be my Savior and my Lord. I give you my life. Teach me to walk with you. If you pray that, know that heaven rejoices, and know that a new journey begins, one filled not with perfection, but with the presence of the God who promises never to leave you or forsake you. And for all of you, whether you are already walking with Christ or still exploring these mysteries, I want to thank you from the depths of my heart for joining me on this journey. It has been a privilege to walk through these reflections with you, to explore the depths of human existence, the beauty of aging, the mystery of the soul, and ultimately the infinite embrace of divine love. Before we go, I want to invite you, if you found value in this journey, if you felt a stirring or learned something new, if your heart was touched, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you can imagine in spreading this message to others who may need it too. And if you haven't already, I warmly encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We are building a community here, a place of deep reflection, of authentic conversations, of shared journeys into the great mysteries of life and beyond. And I would love to hear from you. In the comments below, would you share one insight or feeling that resonated with you during this video? Was there a particular moment that spoke to you? A memory that surfaced? A hope that ignited? Your story matters. Your voice matters. This space was created not just for information, but for connection, and I would be honored to hear your heart. Also, if you feel comfortable, you can share any prayer requests you might have. Whether or not you consider yourself religious, know that you are not alone. We are all fellow travelers on this winding road, and lifting one another up in kindness and compassion is a gift we can offer freely. As we part for now, remember, you are deeply loved. You are seen. Your life has infinite worth, and the one who made you has never stopped calling your name. May you walk forward from here not with fear, but with wonder, not with regret, but with gratitude. Not with uncertainty, but with hope. The journey is not over. It is in many ways just beginning. Thank you for being part of this moment. Thank you for daring to look deeper. Thank you for opening your heart. Until next time, may you walk in the light of truth, the strength of love, and the endless mercy of the one who made you. God bless you. See you in the next video.